1 in 3 is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to 1 in 3. I'm your host, Ingrid. Abuse doesn't happen because of who the victim is. Abusers abuse because that's what they do. It's far too easy to place the blame on the victim when in reality, anyone in an abuser's path can be harmed. My guest today, Becca, is here to bravely share her story with the sole intention of helping others who may be suffering in silence. Here's Becca. Hi, Becca. Thank you so much for joining me today, and welcome to 1 in 3.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you letting me share my story. Just kind of a little background about me. I am a mother of 3. I have 2 teenagers and a 6-year-old. I work as an accounting professional. That's something that I actually got away from for a little while because of what happened to me. But I did recently, this past June, get back into it. So that's been really nice. Otherwise, I'm really into podcasts, music. I love all kinds of music. Always listening to something in the car. So I think I'm pretty, standard mom and professional.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite genre of music?
Not really. I mean, I'd say a lot of times I gravitate towards folk indie kind of sounds. But recently I've been listening to a lot of rap and hip hop, which is not my usual thing. But it's been a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, my playlist, my kids rarely listen to my playlist. We usually have to listen to theirs, but it has the weirdest range of same kind of thing, like folk. I have some hip hop, some 90s music, and I think Ozzy Osbourne is even in there. So it's all over the place. So I'm always interested to hear what people are listening to.
Yeah.
Okay, so you wanted to come on today to share your story because there are so many people out there that even if it's not the exact same story, it's a very similar path that so many of us have gone down. So sharing your story helps kind of, I think people recognize what they're going through and to understand that this isn't just an individual thing that it happens to quite a few people. So do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah. So I started dating someone when I was a teenager. I was a senior in high school, and it was kind of like the first love kind of thing, really intense, but you're just kind of stupid teens, right? And that it was a really short-lived relationship, just kind of the typical first love, really intense, but really quick. And then I lost touch with him a little bit for a couple years. But he was always kind of once in a while he'd reach out and say, hey, especially because now we have, Facebook and all that. So everyone, people don't really stay in the past the way that they used to. But I did move on. I met someone, got married, had my 2 older kids, settled down. But that didn't work out. I did get divorced from my first husband in 2015 when our kids were 5 and 3. So then I was a single mom for a while, just dealing with that, with the kids on my own, kind of figuring out the whole custody thing between my first husband and I. And I was doing freelance writing. At the time, I would write website content mostly and blog posts for small businesses, things like that, because I had gone to college for accounting, but I graduated in 2009, so it was a really bad economy. and I was pregnant with my first daughter at the time. So I didn't get a job in accounting. So I kind of went off in a different direction and did the freelance writing for a while, which worked really well when my kids were little because it was on my own schedule and it was from home. But I decided after I got divorced from my first husband that I wanted to go to grad school for an MBA so that I could get into accounting because I did really enjoy it. It just never happened. The timing didn't work out for me. So I went back to grad school and I worked as a graduate assistant. And a friend of mine had a position. She worked in premium audit, which is kind of a niche, like no one's really heard of it unless you're in that industry, but it's basically auditing payroll records and like business operations for workers' comp and general liability policies. So position that my friend had available that she said, hey, I think this would be a good fit for you. And I started in premium audit then and found out that I really love it. So I kind of started my career from there. So that was in late 2015, and then 2016, I got a job as an auditor. I was just doing admin work in premium audit until then. And that kind of launched my career. And I was in a relationship at the time. I did have like a serious boyfriend. But it was like we weren't really on the same page. He didn't have like the same kind of career aspirations as I did. And it was kind of more into like kid stuff. And I was, like I had kids and I was, focused on them. So that relationship didn't work out, but that was 2017 that relationship ended. And at that time, my ex-boyfriend from when I was a teenager reached out to me and we started talking. And at the time, he was living in Seattle and I was in Pennsylvania. So it was just kind of long distance chatting at that point. But he really like kind of pursued me and made me feel like he was really interested in starting a relationship with me. So I guess just based on like those teenage feelings kind of being brought back up, things escalated really quickly. Like we reconnected in July of 2017, and then he moved to Pennsylvania in September, and we got married in April of 2018. So at first things seemed really great and I knew him, so this was 2017 now, and our relationship when we were teenagers was 2003. So I knew him for a long time. I thought I knew him pretty well. At one point we had been regularly talking. We hadn't seen each other since 2003, but we were regularly talking. Like after I left my first husband, we chatted a lot, but as friends. And we kind of considered each other really close friends, sometimes called it best friends. So I thought I knew him really well. So I felt comfortable moving quickly because I felt like we kind of get into this, how do I want to say this? We kind of are programmed to believe that like the fairy tale, you know what I mean? Like that's, there's going to be a happily ever after. So when we reconnected, I thought, oh, this is my chance. Like this is going to be this great love story because we were kids in love and now we reconnected after all these years.
It's like a Hallmark movie.
Yeah. It really felt like something good was happening. So I guess in the beginning, of course, everything was great. Things don't start out bad. Obviously, if they did, we wouldn't start them in the first place. So there were some disagreements we would have. Sometimes we would fight about, like, because when we were teenagers, he had broken up with me. So I would be like, well, obviously you never cared about me because, you know, like there were these kind of immature fights based on our teenage feelings. But for the most part, it was good. Like, he kind of presented it as wanting to make up for lost time, and like he was going to do all these nice things for me, and he did kind of, I don't know, like in retrospect I realized that he was doing it on purpose to make me think that things were good and that he was changing and trying to make up for lost time and trying to make it up to me that he had broken up with me, that kind of thing. Like he proposed to me on my birthday in 2018, and it was very like emotional and heartfelt, and like he practiced the words and everything, and got me like the exact ring that I wanted. And I thought it was going to be really good. My girls were our flower girls at our wedding. It was really cute. They really took to him, and they started, you know, like they have, their dad is very much a part of their lives. So they have a dad, but they wanted to call him dad. So I thought things were really good. And for the first couple years, I would say 2018 was good. 2019, we decided that we wanted to have a baby. So we started trying for a baby. And that did take more time. My older two girls, I didn't have to try to have them. So this, like, the whole having to, you know, like keep calendars and try for months and months, that was different for me. But it took about 6 months. And then in January, that was actually late 2019 that we started. January of 2019 is when I found out, I was at the end of January, that I was pregnant with my youngest. And things started changing when I got pregnant. It just seemed like just little things, you know, like you don't notice it right away. But for example, I think the first time I really started noticing things changing and him not being as nice, or maybe getting into like gaslighting territory, or guilting me, things like that, is we decided to go, we hadn't had a honeymoon. So we decided to go on a baby moon, and we went to Paris in April of 2019. And it was like right after, because all of my pregnancies, I have like an 8-week span where I'm just sick all the time towards the beginning in the first trimester. And the Paris trip was right after the first trimester. So I was just starting to feel good again. And we went, and I was the only one working at the time, which was very typical. I was usually the only one working. He had jobs, but didn't keep jobs. There would be a lot of jumping around. So we were married, so obviously it was our money, but I had budgeted the trip because we weren't rich. So I would, you know, I had, this is the amount of spending money we had, and I got the euros, so we had the spending money on us. And anytime we went to a store, he would just spend a whole bunch of money, and it would be on things like beer, like things that, like, I obviously wasn't drinking. I was pregnant. So it was just things like that that were expensive and unnecessary. And then I voiced concern about it because I was like, like I want to have a good time, but let's, we need to be a little bit reasonable about our spending because we're here for a week. We don't want to run out of money halfway through. And he got really upset with me and kind of said, well, you're ruining my good time. I'm trying to have a good time here and you're ruining it. And I was just like, I didn't really know what to say. So I let it go. But that was the first time I was like, that was kind of a weird thing that happened. I don't really understand why he reacted that way when I was just voicing a concern. I wasn't even, because I like to give people like the benefit of the doubt. So I was just kind of saying, hey, remember we have a budget, just so you know, let's rein it in a little bit. And he just kind of blew up at me. And I didn't know what to do with that. So we just kind of trudged through the week. But things were weird between us after that. And there was another incident on that trip when we went to Versailles, and it's very crowded. And I was pregnant, and I was just getting over the morning sickness part of the pregnancy, and I was feeling overwhelmed by the crowds there. So I was just kind of trying to stand off to the side and catch my breath. And I get overwhelmed in crowds anyway, so it was like extra stressful. And he got angry at me for just standing over to the side because I wasn't like going with the flow of the other tourists, and I was holding him back from getting to see things in the palace. It was just a very odd reaction because like your pregnant wife is feeling overwhelmed and a little bit ill. Maybe you should be concerned, not angry,
Right.
Yeah. So those were kind of just the first little things that happened that I kind of thought, what's going on here? This is kind of weird. And I will say the other thing during my pregnancy that was concerning was he did not have a driver's license. And he chose not to get a driver's license while I was pregnant. So when I went into labor at 2:00 in the morning,
Oh no.
we had to call a lift. So a lift had to take me to the hospital. And since it was my third, my labor was really fast. So I basically got to the hospital and had her about 20 minutes later. And because he didn't drive, he missed the birth of his daughter. So that was...
because he was home with the other two? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so he had to be, so because it was the middle of the night, so we did call my parents to come watch the kids, but everything happened so fast that they didn't get there in time.
And to be in a lift by yourself in the middle of the night in labor, how awful.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really bad experience. Yeah, so I always kind of gave him like, I know he does have a lot of like anxiety and things like that. So I kind of felt like, well, maybe he just can't drive. Maybe he's too anxious about it. But after the end of our relationship, he got his license right away and started door dashing. So I don't think that was the issue. I think it was just not having the concern or care for me, or I don't know, because he missed the birth of his child too. So you would think like that part of it would make him like compel him to get his license.
Yeah, maybe it was some weird control thing. Like you can't go anywhere without making sure he doesn't need to go somewhere, or right. I don't know. Weird. I thought maybe he like legally couldn't have his driver's license or something, but it was just his choice.
Yeah, there was. So he did have his license he's from California originally, and then he lived in Seattle. So he did have his license out there, and he did lose it for, I don't remember, some stupid reason. But so he was going through, like, he would call, because the license was suspended in 2 states, because it was suspended in California and Washington, he had to go through one and then get it cleared up there before the other one would consider clearing it up on their end. So he just kind of gave up. But then once our relationship ended, he didn't have a problem going through those steps. So,
Of course not. Yeah.
yep. So that was kind of the things that happened during my pregnancy that gave me some inklings that maybe things were not good. And then, so my youngest daughter was born in October of 2019. So I don't really remember how. I think that like the winter after that, and this, well, not the spring because that was 2020, but the winter was good. We were just focused on the baby and obviously really busy with her. So that was okay. He was working at that time. He actually had a decent job at that time, but he had just started there. And then when COVID hit and everything shut down, he was laid off, and then he stayed home because I still worked. I didn't have to go in. I was working from home, but I still had to work. And we decided, since he got laid off, he would watch the kids, because the older kids were doing school from home, of course. So he was just kind of in charge of the kids at that time. And I don't know if the stress of that was just really triggering to him, if it was the isolation from COVID, obviously it was hard for everyone's mental health. We all struggled, but it seemed like it just kind of made him snap, like something in him snapped. He started drinking a lot, and he was really mean when he would drink, and he would pick fights, and you couldn't walk away from a fight with him. If there was a fight and I said, I need space, I can't, this is not going anywhere, we need to come back in half an hour once we cool down, that was not an option. If I tried to go to another room to get away from him so we could cool down, he would just follow me. And if I refused to talk to him, he would start to cry. So I couldn't stop a fight. It was not an option. Once we started a fight, it had to just continue. And it wouldn't really resolve. It would just escalate, like we weren't talking. We weren't having a conversation where we could be adults and figure things out. We were just fighting. We were just yelling at each other. So that got really difficult when his drinking got really bad during COVID, and we started fighting a lot, and there were the fights where I couldn't step away. I started drinking a lot too to cope. So it was just a really bad situation. And during all that, so that was when COVID started. During all that, I changed jobs, partially because he wasn't working and I had an opportunity to take a job it would be a significant pay raise. So I did decide to take that new job, and it was the same kind of thing that I was doing before, but it was kind of more like a step up. It was more intense, longer hours. I was working in compliance before, and then I kind of got into the commercial side of it. So I had like customer interactions that I wasn't used to, which is stressful for me too. So I got in that high stress job, making more money, and we decided to buy a house. So because we weren't stressed enough at that
I was going to say, just
Things weren't
pile
hard
on.
yeah. So we did. We bought a house in October of 2020 is when we closed on the house, and we moved right at the beginning of October in 2020, which was really hard for the kids too, because they were already doing COVID schooling and couldn't see their friends. And now we're moving school districts to a new school where they didn't know anyone. And it was all still all virtual schooling, so they didn't really get to meet anyone, and that was difficult. And my husband wasn't working at the time; he was still not working, so it was just me with all the bills and a mortgage. So it didn't help, obviously.
No, yeah.
Yeah, it made things worse, and that is really when things started to get bad. I mean, they were already bad, but when they got really bad. So October 2020, we moved in here. I would say between October of 2020 and November of 2021, it was a lot of those arguments where I couldn't get away. But at that point, it was still all verbal. There was a lot of, I will say, it was kind of, I guess I would say emotional too, because there were a lot of times when I felt crazy because I would say, I didn't say that, I said this, and he would say, no, you didn't. And I thought, okay, I must have forgotten, like
Yeah.
I couldn't understand why someone would say that if that wasn't true. So I thought, oh, I must have forgotten, or I must have. And we were having issues with drinking too. So I was like, did I drink too much and forgot what I said? Or
Yeah. And stress, probably not sleeping well either. Yeah.
so that was kind of the way it went for that year. The first year that we were in this house was a lot of fighting, some drinking, a lot of gaslighting, where I didn't say that, or you didn't say that, or that wasn't what you meant, or a lot of times calling out my tone, even though I wasn't upset. Like he would say, oh, you sound mad, or don't use that tone with me. And I'm like, I'm not using a tone. I'm talking normally. I don't really understand what's happening. But after that first year, that's when things escalated to physical abuse. Oh, I should actually, I forgot something really important. So we moved here in October 2020. He was having a lot of issues with his mental health at that point. And one of the things that he started doing was, on more than one occasion, I think not regularly, but on more than one occasion, probably 2 or 3 times, he had slapped my older daughters. And I told him he can't do that. It's not okay. And they actually talked to my parents about it too, like when they went and slept over, and my parents came over and said to him, don't lay hands on my grandchildren again. Like my dad said, I will call the cops on you. You will not be okay. So at that point he didn't do anything to my daughters again physically at that point. But he started taking it out on me. So in November of 2021, we were having an argument, and we were in the bedroom, and I was just like sitting on the bed and he was standing up. And he's a really big guy. I'm like 5'4" and he's 6'3". And at that time, I was probably like 120 pounds and he was like 250. So he had a lot of size on me. And I was sitting on the bed and he was standing up, and we were arguing, and he picked me up off the bed and he just threw me on the floor. And we have hardwood floors, so he just threw me on the floor. And I didn't know what to do. when that happens, you're just like, did that really happen? Because it's not something that you think is ever going to happen to you. And it's just kind of shocking, and you're not really sure how to handle it. So I just it was right before Thanksgiving, and I did end up having just bruises all over my body, but mostly that under my clothes. So, like, we went to Thanksgiving at my parents' house, and I wore a dress that covered everything except I had one like right here, and my sleeve went to like here. So if it like came up a little bit, you could see just like a hint of a bruise. And my mom saw the bruise, but she didn't really think anything of it because, she didn't think that was going on. So just seeing like that little edge of the bruise, she just thought I must have, hit my head on or hit my arm on something. Or she didn't ask about it because she didn't want, like, she didn't think that there was anything to ask about. She just thought, because I can be clumsy, sometimes I'll have like a bruise on my shin or something. So she didn't really think anything of it at the time. But yeah, I was kind of hiding a whole bunch of really bad bruises at that time. And then, so that was the start of the physical abuse. And
Did he say anything about it, or did you guys talk about it at all after the first time?
No, not really. I think no, we didn't really talk about it. And I guess I just thought, like, because he does have like a history of impulse control issues, because he does have like ADHD and he is on the spectrum. So I just kind of thought, because he wasn't going to a doctor at the time, he wasn't on any medication for it. So I thought, oh, well, he just needs to get his medication. Like, this is just like like I kind of brushed it off, like explained it away. Because it hadn't happened before. So I thought, and we had been together for 4 years at that point. So, but that was in November of 2021. In December of 2021, we were having an argument when I was driving, and our daughter, just our daughter, not my older two, but our daughter was in the car. So she was 2. And we're just like bickering. Nothing important, just having a disagreement for some reason. And I was driving, of course, because he couldn't drive. And he decided he was going to end the argument by hitting me in the jaw while I was driving. So I pulled over to the side of the road. I told him to get out of the car, and he walked home. And then I don't think we talked about it. I think it was just kind of like, that obviously wasn't okay, So I made him get out of the car and go home. I think I called him out on the fact that our daughter was in the car. Like, you shouldn't have done that in front of her. You shouldn't have hit me while I was driving, while she was in the car, because I could have crashed. We could have gotten hurt, that kind of thing. But nothing changed from there. And then in January of 2022, so it's right in a row, like November, December, January of 2022, we were having an argument. And it was one of the instances where I just wanted to get away from him, because the argument wasn't going to go anywhere. It was just going to escalate. So he wouldn't let me, it was the same thing. If I went to another room, he would just follow me. So I went into the bathroom and I locked the door, and he broke down the door to get to me. And I don't really know what he would have done, because my kids were home, and this was downstairs that we were, and the kids were upstairs, and they were really scared. And my oldest daughter, who was, she would be 11 at the time, she called 911. So the police came and they kind of de-escalated the situation. I don't know what would have happened if she hadn't called the police, because he broke down the door to get to me. So obviously something was going to happen pretty bad.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, so he broke the door down, and I guess she had, because we had been fighting and it had been really loud up until that point. So she had called like minutes earlier before he broke the door down. And it was kind of like, he broke the door down, he came in to the bathroom, and then we heard a knock on the front door saying, you know, police, you have to open up. And he actually said to me, what should I do? And I'm like, you have to open the door, the cops are here. Like,
oh my gosh.
So that's the only, like, I really don't know what would have happened if they hadn't shown up. But they kind of, you know, like, they separated us, talked to us each, made sure everyone was okay, and asked if I wanted to press charges. And I said no, which of course I regret.
Right. But I mean, how many stories, how many of us have been there and you don't?
Yeah. So at that point, so that happened in January of 2022. At that point, there weren't any incidents like that. There wasn't any physical abuse for like the next year. But it was walking on eggshells all the time. You know, it was like we weren't getting along. We were just kind of existing in the same house together. And he had stopped, like, he didn't slap my kids again after I talked to him and my parents talked to him about it. But he wasn't nice to them. And especially my middle daughter, for some reason, he really had it out for her. He would ask her to do things that she didn't know how to do, and then be really critical of her when she couldn't do it, and then insist that she still had to do it even though she made it clear that she wasn't sure how. And I don't know, it must have been a power play or something, because it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense what he was asking her to do. It would just be stupid things, like one time he wanted her to pick up the cat because she was scared to pick up the cat because he would scratch. He's a cat. And he would not let it go. He would not let her walk away. He would not let her say no. She had to do it. And I didn't understand that. And I would say things to him, but he would act like I was like not disciplining my kids because I wasn't asking these like nonsensical things of them. So and my middle daughter, so I don't know why she was the target, but she was. And she had actually at one, like towards the end of our relationship, had a nervous tick where she would like do this clicking.
Poor baby.
Yeah. And I actually said to him, you know, she does that because of you. And he was like, no, that has nothing to do with me. That's just something that she does. But once I kicked him out, it went away within a couple months. So
wow.
Yeah. So now I guess I'll get to the part that I didn't know about that was going on. So I don't know. There's a lot that I don't know because I don't want to press my daughter to talk about things that are really hard for her mental health. So I don't know every detail, but I do know that when she was 10, he started grooming her. And I found out after everything happened, I found out that when she was 10, there was a point where we went camping. Well, we went to a cabin. It wasn't really camping, but we went to a cabin as a family and just having like a nice weekend. And my youngest daughter she would have been 1 at the time. So she was just a baby. And I was sleeping. The baby and I were sleeping in like the main room. And then my middle daughter was asleep. There were bunk beds. But my oldest daughter was still awake and my husband was awake. And my oldest daughter had asked him to play like a board game, and he said, yeah, like we can do that, but here you have to drink this beer and give me a kiss. So, I didn't, that wasn't, even though he was abusive to me and he had been abusive to the girls, like he had slapped them and he was, I don't even know, I guess like psychologically abusing my middle daughter, really. I didn't, like, sexual abuse was not on my radar of my children. That was not something that I thought would ever happen. I had known him for a really long time, and he was always, like, when he lived in Seattle, he lived with a woman who was 10 or 15 years older than him. He always was with older people, or he was more interested in older women. At least that's what he said. So it didn't even occur to me that that would be something that would happen. Obviously, it wasn't on my radar because I had kids, and if I had thought that was a possibility, he would not have been in my house ever.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that incident when she was 10 was kind of the start of the grooming. And then from there, a lot of it was just kind of trying to be like her friend, like, you know, like, I understand you, that kind of thing. But there was something that happened right before I kicked him out that seemed weird to me, but I didn't realize that it was indicative of what it was indicative of. So what happened was, so my daughter was 12, and she was like, you know, she's 12, she's going through puberty, so she was like getting curious, and you know, for some reason he thought it was appropriate to take her to a store and say, you can go in there and buy yourself a vibrator. And I thought, like, I didn't think that it was because he was like sexually abusing her. I thought it was because he was clueless and dumb and didn't understand that it was inappropriate.
Yeah, right.
So I was kind of like, that wasn't appropriate, but I didn't realize that it meant what it meant. So that was probably like the beginning of February of 2023. And then on February 28th of 2023, we were home, and I was just, we actually had a fight that night too. It's normal. But we had a fight. I actually remember what that fight was about. I was playing a game with the kids. It was like one of those like murder mystery in a box games.
Oh, yeah, those are fun.
Yeah.
We love those in my house.
Fun, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was like, we were trying to like work through the clues, and I was getting a little overwhelmed. So I just wanted to go in the bedroom and just take like 10 minutes to myself, because sometimes I get overwhelmed. So I just need a couple minutes to myself, and then I'll come back and everything's fine. But he didn't like that. He followed me to the bedroom and he told me that I was ruining game night, and the kids were really upset, even though the kids didn't care. And we just, like, the fight escalated from there. I was kind of like, what are you talking about? They are not upset at all. I'm coming back in 5 minutes. Nothing bad is happening. Why do we have to fight about this? And he wouldn't let it go. So I actually tried to leave the house because I thought, if he's not going to let me go to another room and cool off, I'm going to go take a walk and then I'll come back. But I got maybe halfway down the driveway and he followed me and he picked me up and he carried me back to the house. And from there, we just kind of went on with our evening, like finished the game, like it didn't happen, kind of. And then at bedtime, I was really tired. I was like passing out tired. I was so tired. But he wanted to stay up, and my oldest daughter wanted to. They were going to watch a movie together. That's what they said. So that's what I thought happened. That they just watched a movie together while I was sleeping. And I mean, that was a Tuesday. The rest of the week just kind of went on as normal and, school and work. And then on Saturday, which was March 4th, my oldest daughter was an usher at the school play, and it was that weekend. And the school had sent an email saying that on Sunday they had to do set breakdown and everyone had to bring a parent volunteer. So I had some things to do. I had like chores to do. So I was telling her, oh, your stepdad's going to take you to do the breakdown on Sunday since I can't. And she got a really uncomfortable look. And she said, he didn't tell you what happened. And I don't, like, my stomach dropped because that didn't sound good. Like, what do you mean? What happened? What happened? And she told me that on Tuesday night when I was sleeping and they were watching a movie together, he had sexually assaulted her. And he had been really drunk, and she didn't tell me all the details because, again, I don't want to push her to tell her story unless she wants to, except for, like, she had to talk to detectives and she had to talk to like advocates and tell them her story in detail. So I asked her what happened, and she did she explained that he had touched her breast, he had licked her breast. Otherwise, we didn't. From that point, that was all that I needed to hear. Because he was asleep at that point in our bed. So I went and woke him up, and I said, I know what you did, and you need to get out of my house. So luckily, he did. In retrospect, I realized that he could have done something really bad at that point. So maybe it would have been a better idea to call the police first. But at that point, I was just, you hurt my kid, get out of my house, So that started this journey that we just kind of wrapped up in June of this year. Because I actually didn't call the cops that day on Saturday because my daughter asked me if she could finish her play first. She really wanted to do that, and I wanted to do what was most comfortable for her. So I did it. That was really hard because I had to go. I think it was Annie. It was so I had to go watch Annie while, like, with all this in my head, and just kind of act, normal, because I was out with, at the middle school. And actually, so that was Saturday. On Sunday, we had to do the teardown, but they were having another show, and my parents were coming to that show, and I hadn't told them yet. So that was the really uncomfortable situation where we did, like, the teardown of the set and all that. I had to do that, even though this was going on in the back of my mind. And then I came home, and that's when we called the police. Actually, I didn't say anything to my parents when we were at the play because I didn't want to bring it up in public. But when we got back to my house, we sat down and I said, there's a reason that my husband isn't here right now, and this is what happened. And it was really nice that they were there, because that's when I called the cops, and the cops came over when they were still there, and they talked to my daughter and just kind of got enough for the report and to get things rolling from there. And then there was a detective assigned to the case. And so I had just kicked my husband out, and he didn't have a job, and he doesn't really have any friends here because he's not from here, and he's not really a social person. So when I kicked him out, he decided to check himself into a inpatient mental health center, because when you do that, HIPAA laws mean that detectives can't find you there because they're not allowed to say that you're there. So he ended up going down to Philly for his inpatient care, and the detectives couldn't find him there. And then when he was released from that facility, he was homeless. So, and the homeless shelters also don't really cooperate with law enforcement. So they couldn't really get any details on where he was at that point either. So it was kind of a wild goose chase for a while. There were times where because he did go to one of the temp jobs he had, he ended up there was some kind of deal where he could work it was like a manufacturing facility. They had some kind of thing where if he worked there, like, they would pay for a hotel room across the street. So he was doing that, and the detectives were able to find where he was when he was doing that. So they did interview him, but it was just kind of the initial investigation. So they couldn't arrest him yet. They were still investigating things. And it was really hard to keep a track of him because he left that job, and then so he wasn't living in that hotel anymore. He was what we kind of later found out, he had moved in with an old co-worker's cousin who was 19, and her 14-year-old brother.
Oh my gosh.
Living with them. Yeah. So that obviously was not an appropriate situation. And I actually, because I found out about that because his former coworker had said something to me, and I was like, he's not safe to be around your cousin and your cousins. You need to let them know that that's not appropriate.
How old was he at the time?
He was, let's see. Hold on. 35.
And a 19-year-old. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So they did end up asking him to leave, fortunately. So I'm really glad that they did, because I don't know if anything happened to them. You know, maybe something did. It's up to them whether or not they want to talk about it, but it wouldn't surprise me because, you know, he's obviously a predator. Like, that's been
Yeah.
established now. So, but then he kind of he was in different homeless shelters for a while, and so the detectives couldn't really track him down, and they did actually get to a point where they were ready to press charges. And they didn't press charges until January of 2024. So almost a year after the actual incident. I don't really understand the justice system, even though I've had to deal with it. I don't understand why it took that long. I think some of it was because he was so hard to track down. So, like, doing the interviews with him and things like that, that was difficult. And I know that there were some things, like my daughter had to go to counseling. She went through, like, she got free counseling as a victim, and the detective was able to, like, coordinate with our permission with her therapist, just to kind of see where she was, because they wanted to make sure if we had to go to trial that she would be able to testify.
Okay.
So I think they were holding off on charges for that reason as well. But they
Okay.
did.
So maybe they were just making sure they had everything in place that going to trial, he was going to be found guilty.
Yeah, I think they just
Okay.
wanted to make sure that, you know, he wasn't just going to get off because they hadn't, you know, checked all their boxes or something like that.
Yeah.
So, so then they did, I think they filed charges around like mid-January of 2024, but they didn't know where he was. So they filed the charges and there was a warrant for his arrest, but they had no clue where he was. And then I got a Facebook message on, I think it was January 21st or 22nd. My birthday is the 23rd, so I know it was right before my birthday.
Okay.
And I got a Facebook message from a woman saying, hey, I think that you're his ex-wife, and my friend just met him a couple weeks ago, and he's moving in with her. And I did a background check on him, and I see these pretty serious charges were filed, and I just wanted to know if you have any input about that, because she was just wanting to make sure that her friend was okay.
That is a good friend. We all need that friend.
Yes. So I told her everything. I said that, you know, he did all this to me. He did this to my daughter. He's not a safe person. And I actually, like, we talked back and forth for a long time. And I said, the police are looking for him. They don't know where he is. Could you give me your friend's address so I can let the police know where he is? So she agreed, and it was a little bit difficult because she had gone to her friend's house several times, but she didn't know the exact, it was like a townhouse complex. So she didn't know the exact number, but she knew, like, to look at a map where it was. So I actually called the police, and I called the police where he was. He was actually in like central Pennsylvania at that point, and we're in eastern Pennsylvania. So he went like 2 hours away. And so I called the police out there and let them know, hey, there's a warrant for this person's arrest, and I know where he is. And I gave the address that the friend had given me, but the police went there and they said that was not the correct address, that someone else answered the door.
Oh, shoot.
So, yeah. So I was like, I asked the girl who had messaged me about her friend, I said, would you be able to call the police and kind of direct them because they're having trouble finding the right unit? So she did call them and gave them more, precise directions, and they found the right unit and they did arrest him. And then he was, so he was held there for a couple days, and then they sent him back to this county. And he was held on $150,000 bail, which he had no resources, so he wasn't going anywhere. And that was a really hard, that's just kind of the start of it, like you think once they get arrested, like things are over kind of.
Yeah.
That's just like the beginning of the justice process. And it's confusing if you've never been in it before. It can be really hard to navigate, and you don't always get information about what's happening. There's a lot that's happening behind the scenes that you don't know about, and then you have to just kind of wait for either. So we met with the district attorney a few times, so they would give us information, but a lot of the times I was kind of like, I don't really understand what that means for like what's actually going to happen. So we did, at that point, they would start scheduling like status conferences to talk about what is going to happen from there. And my dad and I would go to every status conference that was scheduled, but they would be continued all the time. So we would go to the courthouse, we would sit and wait for our case to be called. And then the DA would come out and say, oh, they're continuing it, so you'll just have to come back another time. So we were really nervous at that point. He was charged with 2 felonies and a misdemeanor. And it was just kind of, there was a really wide range of what could happen based on which one of those he got, if any of them that he got convicted of. And there was a lot of back and forth about whether or not he was going to plead guilty or plead no contest. At first, he said he was going to plead no contest, but then he changed his mind. And then there was actually a trial scheduled. So we assumed that we were going to have to go to trial, which was really upsetting for my daughter. She did not want to go through a trial. She had no interest in that, but she was willing to do it because she wanted to make sure that he got some kind of sentence. So eventually there was a lot of back and forth. I should say, so he had a public defender. And then there was an issue because that public defender left the public defender's office. So then he had to get a new one, and they kind of had to start over with that because, like they have to be brought up to speed on where the case is and all of that. So that was a big setback. And then we would get things continued a lot because he was asking for additional mental health evaluations. So that was a big thing where we would go and they would be like, oh no, they have to do another mental health evaluation, so we're going to do this another time. Eventually we got to the point where I think it was early this year, he finally pled guilty. He took a plea deal. He was convicted of, I believe, one of the felonies. It was definitely a felony, but the misdemeanor was dropped, and then the other, I believe it's the most serious felony that he was convicted of, but they agreed to drop the other felony and the misdemeanor. So he pled guilty to that, but then we had to wait for sentencing. And sentencing was originally scheduled for March, I think. March of this year, and it got continued multiple times and finally happened in June. I think it was June 24th.
That is crazy.
So we got to go, like, I don't say got to go because it wasn't fun, but my parents went, I went, my daughter went. Actually, my daughter and my oldest and my middle daughter wanted to go to support her sister. So she went as well. And then my older daughter's father came up he lives near Baltimore, so he drove up to come too. And I read a victim impact statement. I read one for myself, and then I read one for my daughter as well, because she didn't want to speak publicly, but she did want her words to be heard. So I was able to do that. And he was sentenced to 30 to 60 months with time served. So he, at that time, had been in jail for almost a year and a half. So at this point, it would be another year. And so I'm not thrilled with that part of the sentencing. What I am happy about is he is a tier 3 sex offender, and he will have to register for the rest of his life. And that was really important to me and my daughter, because we wanted people to know, like, if they searched him, we wanted them to know that he's not a safe person to be around. So that's kind of where we're at now. Now my youngest daughter is his daughter. When I kicked him out after I found out what he did, I was granted a protection from abuse, and it's good for 3 years, and it names all 3 of my children. So that means that he couldn't have contact with his daughter even if he wanted to. Now, as part of the sentencing, he's not allowed to have contact with any of us. Of course, the time he's incarcerated, but also for the entire time he's on probation, which he was sentenced to 3 years of probation. So what I'm doing now, or trying to do, I've been trying to find a lawyer. It's been a little difficult, but what I'm in the process of now is trying to get his parental rights terminated, because I don't want to be in a situation. Sometimes you hear horror stories where someone who should not have contact with a child, even supervised contact with a child.
They are out there, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then something really bad happens, and
then they just throw their hands in the air like, oh, well, we couldn't have seen that coming.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, so yeah, I'm working on that. I feel like I do have some time, because he's in, at minimum, he could get out this coming summer, but then we have 3 years beyond that before he's allowed to contact his daughter. Although I will say I don't know that he'll respect that, because it is just a piece of paper at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to get those rights, like, legally terminated, so that if he does ever try to get in contact with her, he has no right to do so.
Are you facing, like, pushback? Have you talked to attorneys, and have they said no? Or is it just difficult finding somebody that specializes in doing that?
It's difficult finding somebody that specializes in doing that. And I have, through my job, I have legal insurance. So I'm trying to find someone that takes the legal insurance that knows how to do that. So that's been the difficulty, I did contact a couple lawyers that take the insurance, but they're like, oh, we don't do termination of parental rights. So just trying to find the match where they'll take my insurance, because legal things are very expensive.
They are. They're crazy. Well, and I'm sure he's not going to sign them over. He's not going to agree, obviously. Oh my gosh. This has been like just a wild, I was actually thinking about when you were telling your story, how he was treating your middle daughter differently. I wonder if that was part of the grooming of your older daughter, almost.
Yeah. That makes
to see like, this is how bad life can be, but you're my shining star,
right.
Making her feel almost more important.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have any other kids?
No.
Okay. Has he been married before or other times? Okay. No. I'm curious if there's any other stories about him out there. Usually, I can't see one person getting to this point in their life and just becoming this level of abusive.
Yeah, I did. So when things first happened, I reached out to some of his ex-girlfriends, like, did anything ever happen to you? Because I just feel kind of blindsided here. And I hadn't, like, no one said anything, like, no physical abuse, but one of his ex-girlfriends did say that they would fight a lot and that he would follow her. They could not stop a fight. He would follow her all around the house. So that was just, I don't think he just like started acting that way with me. I think, yeah.
Yeah. No, this has been, maybe a lifetime in the making. And just, it always escalates, right? Like it just keeps getting worse and worse. And if it's not with the person they're currently with, it's going to get worse and worse for the next person. Thank you, first of all, for sharing that. I know that's difficult to talk about all of the story. He makes me sick that he also takes advantage of the mental health program,
Yeah.
It's just despicable, honestly. All of it's, he's just a very despicable person, period. But yeah, to also take advantage of knowing that he can play the system by making these certain claims. I took a couple notes that I could totally see moving fast with somebody that you dated in high school and that you've kept in contact with. And it's like that, almost like that nostalgia of remembering the kid love, the innocent love, and just trying to go back to that. So I don't think that, for me, I don't think that would have raised any red flags at all. Pregnancy is a big factor in what brings out abuse.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a lot of statistics about that. A lot of people say it started when I got pregnant. And I always think it's something that happens, there is a pattern there, but it seems crazy to me. Like when the woman you're supposed to love is pregnant is when you're going to start treating her that way.
Yeah, because that's part of you there. That's you. You guys did that together. Yeah. Because, you look at, I watched the Lacey Peterson documentary on Netflix, and I think at the end of it, they shared some statistics about pregnancy, and like the risk for homicide jumps up incredibly with pregnancy. Well, I'm sorry you went through that. I'm very grateful that you're sharing this story, though, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who are listening to it saying, oh yeah, that happened to me too.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell my story. I really appreciate that. That's why it's hard to talk about, and it's hard to kind of bring up those feelings. But looking back at it and hearing other people's stories and kind of matching up. Oh, that happened to me too. Oh, I didn't realize that was indicative of something, you know? I just think it's important for everyone to share their story if they're comfortable doing so, because it helps other people realize that they're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And it helps. I feel like anytime I've shared even just bits of my story, it's just a little bit of weight that I get to take off that I'm not carrying anymore. It's like I get to release it a little bit. Is there anything that we missed or anything that you wanted to mention that we didn't cover?
I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine.
I don't think so. I was kind of trying to, I hope I didn't, like, I was trying to be kind of, oh my gosh, I can't think of the word, like linear with the story. But then I think about things like, oh yeah, this happened. And like, I almost forgot to mention how he treated my middle daughter, but that was really bad. And like I said, she had a nervous tic, and I knew it was because of the way he was treating her. And I told him that, and he denied that. But yeah, I kicked him out, and a couple months later, no more tic. And she seemed, you know, she has some lasting, like she was being like mentally beaten down all the time.
Yeah.
So there are some lasting like confidence issues, but she has improved a lot, and she is going to therapy now for that, to work on that too. So it's a lot.
That's so important. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy how much psychological damage one person can do, you know,
to so many people.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So before we close, do you have any lasting words of wisdom or encouragement that you would like to leave with listeners?
I think the one thing that I want people to realize is not just that you're not alone, but also it's not your fault. A lot of people think that it's their fault, or if they don't ask for help right away, then it's their fault from that point going forward, because they had the opportunity to ask for help. And first of all, abusers know that people who they're abusing feel shame, and they kind of play on that. They want you to feel that shame because they know that then you're going to keep the secret. So just realizing that it's not your fault, and it's okay if you didn't ask for help right away. That doesn't mean that you don't get to ask for help ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Becca. I really, really, really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you again, Becca, for joining me today. And thank you, Warriors, for listening. I've included the link to Becca's 1 in 3 profile in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong. And wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone.
Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3 podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.